Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Pikmin.
There we go. Okay. 2023. It's time. Base management, unit upgrades, research, etc. I think all of those would only really make things worse. There are fundamentally right and wrong ways to play. That's what I'm going to focus on. Time management, problem-solving gameplay revolving around the Pikmin, and encouraging replayability with an emphasis on efficiency over indulgence. Oh, you're small in this. This is all great. I saw they did it. Shit. I should have guessed him. Do they Interesting. Okay. Okay. Oh, cave's back. Shit. Nighttime. Oh, God. I'm afraid the dog's gonna be too important, but we'll see. When Pikmin 4 first got announced, I was hyped. The more I've watched and the more I've thought about it, the more worried I've been. And there's just so many elements that are taken away from the Pikmin. There's technical stuff I'm not happy with. What game are we playing? Why are we doing this in Pikmin? Like, let the Pikmin carry things. Let the Pikmin break things. Make new Pikmin to do these things. What are we doing? What are we doing here, guys? Come on. You have weird Pikmin Olimar, who is brainwashed, and he's talking about the concept of Dandori, and you have to fight him. He says 1v1 me, and then you go into his private COD lobby, and then you play him in Pikmin. Closing thoughts. Scared. Annoyed. I'm not seeing what I like in Pikmin 1, 2, and 3 here. On July 21st, 2023, after years and years of hopes and dreams and anticipation, we finally got to play the fourth mainline installment in the Pikmin franchise. And unfortunately, I didn't like it very much. Now, the way people talk about this game, that sentence alone might have already sent you clicking away at Mach speed, but if you're still watching, then hear me out. I am not making this video to tell you that you're wrong or stupid for enjoying this game, nor am I upset that the end result didn't turn out like my concept for Pikmin 4. Matter of fact, on paper, the Pikmin 4 we got had a lot of things I specifically wanted. All returning Pikmin, multiple landing zones, the return of human objects and environments, even things like nighttime gameplay and more involved captains, though drastically different in execution, should check off positive boxes for me. At the same time, I feel like I'm living in a parallel universe where I played a different Pikmin 4 than everyone else. Or at least I'm one of the only people who can talk about its flaws and acknowledge them without 30 qualifying statements or talking about some hypothetical newcomers to the franchise. In my opinion, many of my fears in my now most disliked video have come to pass. Here's the thing though, this video took me a while to make, and everyday life aside, it was for two reasons. One, it took me months to get through the hours of boring videos to write my notes, even on 2x speed. And two, I didn't really know how to approach putting my thoughts into a video. It felt like I could talk about it for 5 minutes or 5 hours. Like I could just say, the game wasn't great, or detail every second of gameplay. What I needed was to go back to writing fundamentals and think of a thesis, and this is what I came up with. Pikmin 4 might not be the worst video game out there, but it is a failure as a Pikmin game. While the game on its own is probably a 5 or 6 out of 10, it's like a 3 as a new mainline Pikmin. I feel that at its core, the game mishandles the central elements of the series so far, while burying its new good aspects in tedium and bad choices. So while I'm going to start this video talking about the consistent pieces of the franchise as seen in this game and the things I liked, I'm going to discuss what didn't work for me and the issues that I feel absolutely cannot be ignored when reviewing this game. I'm also not really going through chronologically and will jump around, so spoilers for all of Pikmin 4 throughout. One last thing before we start though, again, I'm not trying to attack anyone. If this is your favorite Pikmin game or your favorite game of 2023, while I truly cannot wrap my head around it, good for you. I won't try to convince you otherwise, but I do hope I can convince you to acknowledge the game's faults more fairly. So don't be weird about this, please. Just chill and watch the video, or don't. In the Pikmin franchise, a simple triangle constructs the essential experience: story and characters, Pikmin, and areas. As I tackle each of these categories, I'm going to bring up one major flaw in each that is a major detriment to Pikmin 4. To start, I want to talk about how this game handles story and characters, beginning with the characters. Let's start with everyone's favorite quarter-sized captain, Olimar. In the past, I've gone on record saying that Olimar is one of my favorite Nintendo characters, and I think many Pikmin fans would agree with me on that. His intelligence, wit, courage, and compassion frame him as an extremely well-rounded and likable character, even in these very not character-driven games. However, in the past, I've also stated that they don't always get Olimar right. If 1 and 2 are pretty much his peak, then 3 flies a little off course. Not quite into an asteroid, but enough to feel a tad off. It frames him as kind of foolish and treasure-happy, constantly crashing on this planet and getting into trouble just because he's stuck in this horrible cycle with his job and also wants to explore for his own curiosity. He started to lose that sense of urgency to do what he has to do to be with his family. I'm happy to say, though, I do generally like Olimar's characterization in Pikmin 4, and feel like it gets back to his roots. He feels driven by intelligence and empathy, someone who seeks to understand this world and asks really smart questions, but also doesn't lose sight of his goal of staying alive to get home to his family. I like things like the fact that while his first crash was purely an accident, his second was because he had turned around to care for Moss and something went wrong. That's in character to me. Similarly, I think Louie is better here than his Pikmin 3 appearance. In 3, they made him this absolute lunatic incapable of intelligent thought, but here he's still definitively malevolent, while mostly just being weird and off-putting. You can tell he's not an idiot, but that his mind and goals are completely incomprehensible, and that he absolutely should not be here. There's this interesting side concept running throughout that Louie is this kind of negative to Olimar's positive, along with this comment about Louie mimicking Olimar poorly. Olimar imbues things with a sense of determination and cooperation, while Louie makes things resort to their baser instincts, as we see in the final boss being evil with Louie and not on its own. On the whole, an improvement over 3, and you get some good stuff from the two captains in conversations and lines. Of course, the reason you're having these conversations is because you're not playing as these two in the main game, and thus we get into some big issues with the game's setting. In a series first, Pikmin 4 has players design and control their own custom captain, and this doesn't work for me at all. Look, if you know anything about me at all, you know that I love me some custom characters. You give me a game that I can design myself in, and I will spend hours doing it, and then probably adding every single one of my friends too. The reason why Pikmin 4 doing this is bad to me is twofold. One, it's extremely limited. You're telling me we're not allowed to have, basic hair colors? It's not like hair color is tied to the suit, so why? And even the limited options we do have are limited in themselves, being locked to the size's base head shapes and allowing for no further tweaking. Some games get away with their limits because the characters have to wear a bunch of outfits or do a bunch of unique animations, but there's not really any excuse here. I think the 4 head shapes and sizes are pretty solid, so you only have to account for those 4 shapes when it comes to hair, and everything is inside the helmet anyway. You could definitely have more options without breaking the game. And second, it's really lame to be a custom character in this world. While not being deeply character-focused, the first 3 games do a great job at giving us insight into our captains and making them likable and distinct. The game has a certain voice and tone that speaks through these characters, and putting in a blank slate with meaningless text responses eliminates that as a possibility, especially when they're inherently bound to their canine companion, which I will get to later. In one of the smarter things I've ever said, I had a comment about Olimar and effective player characters along the lines of that while it can be satisfying to see yourself in the game world, it can be more engaging to be playing as a character that we want to see triumph. Beating Pikmin 1 isn't only rewarding in conquering the challenge, you also get the sense that you got Olimar off this planet, with failure sharing that additional weight as well. But maybe a custom protagonist could work if you surrounded them with new, interesting personalities. So, did Pikmin 4 do that?
No!
You know, I would say Pikmin was 6 for 6 when it came to well-designed characters in their games, and now their win-loss has been completely tanked to an unrecoverable state.
Quit! Quit, bro! Quit!
There is not a single enjoyable character in this game's new cast, growing only more and more bloated as you find castaways. First impressions are already abysmal with Colin, and he is fairly widely hated due to his constant interruptions, though actually he wound up being one of my more liked characters in comparison to everyone else. He has some decent dialogue and plays off situations okay, but it's constantly shattered by being a mouthpiece for the game. Also, this one voice line sounds like Ochi, but not quite, and it sticks in my head and drives me crazy. Ochi! I didn't mind Bernard either, with his vague cool guy vibe and not much else, but I think I really only like those two because they feel like the only two competent people here. In a sea of schmucks and clowns, I can believe that they're actually worth having around. Everyone else, though, not so much. Shepard has potential to be an interesting character, but naturally the game does nothing with her. She's kind of bossy, but also a complete coward who clearly isn't comfortable or competent as captain, to the point where Ochi does so much better with some random nobody than her and her decades of family history with the dogs. They should have actually leaned into that aspect of her, had her in way over her head and only in this job because of her family. This would at least give her a reason to put so much trust in you, seeing you're a natural with Ochi and the Pikmin and whatnot. But no, as with all the characters in this game, she learns nothing and doesn't grow. And then everyone else just sucks. Everyone outside the crew is worthless to the game, and I actively hate Dingo and Yanni. I don't even have a particular reason, they just annoyed the living hell out of me.
I'm gonna kill this night mission guy. I'm throwing him out to the beasts.
There's no reason to have this many named characters from new planets for no reason in the game standing around your home base when their writing is trash and they have nothing to say, especially in a franchise that has had some really entertaining and endearing character writing in the past. The game's only saving grace is the presence of returning characters like Almar and Louis and the three Copites. You know, the blue, pink, and green ones with the scientists and So now we have to acknowledge the biggest issue with this game's story and characters, and this will be my first point towards this being a bad Pikmin game in my eyes. For some baffling blowhog reason, Pikmin 4 is essentially a retcon/reboot of the Pikmin franchise. This became clear to me slowly while playing the demo, first being confused why Alamar would say a rare double crash landing when crashes happen all the time here, and then the dread slowly setting in reading Alamar's logs. In short, Captain Alamar crashes on the planet, lives out an abridged version of Pikmin 1, then crashes again, sending out a signal to the rescue corps to come save him. They have their own troubles with landing and have to rescue the crew, Alamar, other castaways, and find the resources to repair the ship and leave. Pikmin 4's story is Pikmin 1 again, but completely undermining what made 1's setting special and relegating 2 and 3's well thought out additions to literal nightmares and bad feelings of the characters, and actively replacing previous protagonists with hollow, meaningless stand-ins instead of seizing the opportunity for a fun cameo and owning up to the retcon. I mean, why? Why bother actively stamping out the continuity while also being cheeky and bashful about it? What's worse is that while erasing 2 and 3, it also chooses to make 1 worse by not only being a reboot, but being painfully aware of the franchise that came before. Pikmin 4 removes any subtlety from the natural world of PNF 404 and turns it into the Pikmin planet. All the Pikmin and Alamar and Louis are here, along with tons of returning enemies and bosses and treasure. Not because they bring meaning to the game, but because it's a Pikmin game. And they gotta put in all the stuff Pikmin fans want in here. Everything about the story and the world treat the conventions of Pikmin as mimetic truths of the universe, rather than just things that are small external parts of the experience. Ships crash here to set up the game? Well, now everyone crashes, all the time, so much so that there's dozens of castaways who just wind up on this somehow unknown planet. And then there's this game's obsession with Dondori. On the surface, I think there's something enticing about this planet, infecting inhabitants with an overwhelming urge to play Pikmin. It's silly, while also having potential deeper layers about this being our own planet Earth, and like the spirit of human beings and our desire for progress and cooperation seeping into the world itself. But on the other hand, the concept of Dondori has only become a talking point for Pikmin with this game, and when it was first brought up, I thought it was just a really faithful, exciting game design philosophy, not an extremely literal in-game term that it shoves down your throat endlessly. A subplot of the game is essentially be good at Dondori.
TM.
Having leaflings spout the word like billboards, instead of letting the concept guide the game behind the scenes. We're focused on treating the game world and its inhabitants like a video game, instead of understanding the natural order of things on this planet and becoming a part of it. This worst reworking of Pikmin 1 culminates in Pikmin 4's take on Olimar, as even the best character here suffers at the hands of its choices. You know how in Pikmin 1, Olimar is actually a cool character that adapts to save himself? Like, stepping outside of our role as a player and looking as a spectator to the story, Olimar crashes on this planet, understands and unlocks the potential of the Pikmin to successfully escape, and in the future is able to best harder and harder challenges while making the Pikmin smarter and more capable of survival. PNF 404 has a huge impact on Olimar, and Olimar has a huge impact on PNF 404. Not anymore! In the canon of this new timeline, Olimar has a negligible impact on the Pikmin or the planet. The Pikmin seem aware that they're in a Pikmin game and are only there to help you Dandori your heart out, though I'll talk more about that momentarily. Olimar's legacy is now that he crash landed again, got saved by a bunch of idiots, then sat around for weeks while you did all the work. The Pikmin are no better off than they started, and to put even finer a point on it and take things very literally, Olimar, the main protagonist of the Pikmin franchise, would not have been able to escape were it not for the introduction of a new character. In this version of events, the game decides to remove any sense of Olimar's achievement or importance to the world. He's just another captain. I understand that for some people, this might not be a big deal. You're just there for the gameplay, and that's fine. But if you care at all about the continuity of these games, I can't imagine a world where the execution of this is satisfying or enjoyable. And you know what? You should care about the continuity. Why bother being a fan if you're going to ignore something that used to be good that is no longer there? All of the atmosphere that's been built up over the games, the mystique of the world, the thrill of finding new creatures and familiar faces, none of that matters anymore outside of the context of it's a Pikmin video game. By the game's own doing, it strips the world of anything that made it feel weighty and real, leaving only the simulation that is the game itself. That said, the progression of the story itself is fine. In spite of the quality of the writing, I was pretty interested to see where the story would go and what was going on, and I was motivated both to save Olimar and to Kyoichi. To end this section on a negative note though, setting the tone for the majority of the video, just like this did Pikmin 1 worse, I also think it did Pikmin 2 worse in that Louis really doesn't need to be here, and his actions make no sense. Why is Louis kidnapping people? I genuinely did not understand this in my note-taking, and when I looked it up, I just found a bunch of 4 reasons unknown, which, maybe isn't the best writing. I get the concept of Louis being a freak and abandoning his mission to live on the planet. That's fine. Him kidnapping people to make leaflings and Dandori battle you doesn't follow any internal logic. His showing up in the story is literally just another Pikmin 2 reference, and the endgame easily could have been reworked. This ties back into the green valor-stealing pooch, Moss. Legitimately, for most of the game, I thought Moss was a twist villain. She's unnecessarily crowbarred into Olimar's story, she's the reason Olimar becomes a leafling, she helps him abduct and leafify castaways, there's this ominous reference to somebody setting up landing zones, then she kind of has this weird look when Olimar's defeated and then teams up with Louis. This also wasn't helped by being spoiled on what the final boss looks like and thinking, well, I guess Moss turns into a giant monster at some point. And you know what? That would have been cool. You save Olimar, but have to come back to Kyoichi, and what do you find but Moss there to cause trouble and all for boss fights? Maybe teaming up with random leaflings for Dandori battles, until she reveals her final evil form at the end, or maybe gets cured of being a leafling herself. No need for Louis and a cheap Pikmin 2 reference, just use the pieces available. Maybe even offer some insight as to how this dog got here in the first place. But no, the game isn't interested in that. The landing zones are there because it's a video game, and Moss is just there. For our next section, it wouldn't be a Pikmin game without the titular little buds themselves. I considered calling this section gameplay, but really, the Pikmin are the gameplay. Or at least they should be, but we'll talk about that later. For now, let's talk about Pikmin types. Pikmin 4 brings back every type, something I was looking forward to. And I generally say that I think all the different types are handled well here when left to their own devices. The core 3 all get their time to shine and stick to what they know. I'd say Yellow gets the least, as much of the electrical environmental tasks from 3 are gone, and they're not the bomb rock Pikmin anymore, so they just kind of go high and occasionally fight electric enemies. else. Blue Pikmin were surprisingly not irrelevant as I feared they would be based on the game's choices, as certain sections of areas and especially caves make good use of them. And red Pikmin are all reliable and even get an environmental task of their own finally, though not a very exciting one. With flaming pine cones, you light larger pyres and use them to break down chunks of ice or bundles of hay, I guess? It's nice to see red Pikmin have a more active connection to fire the way blue and yellow have had to their elements in the past, but it's pretty forgettable and inessential in my opinion. Because it's an infinite resource, there's never any brain power going into pathing choices or any real stress about working with the fire before it goes out. It's just bing bang boom, cleared the obstacles, move on. Also, they're annoying to navigate with. I personally think it'd be more fun to set red Pikmin themselves ablaze. Moving on to our less consistent Pikmin, white and purple both get a good amount of love here, especially white. A redesign to poison, new enemies, and them still being incredibly helpful in their trademark speed and digging. They feel like a pretty essential part of your squad, and it's nice that their onion is behind a tough challenge we'll talk about later. Purples are great as always, with the same going for their onion, and definitely have their moments to shine with a few treasures and things ideal for purples, especially in caves and challenges. I will say though, I don't think this game has a lot of love for the Pikmin 3 duo. Winged Pikmin still have helpful pathing, but there's nothing that comes to mind that feels tailor-made for them aside from maybe one or two cave sections. And then rock Pikmin I feel actively had jobs taken away from them. Sure, they're still good in combat and in not getting crushed, but there has to be a grand total of like 4 obstacles they can break in the whole game. Most importantly though, for some reason, rock Pikmin are not able to break the pots. That feels like such an obvious match for them, and it's really confusing that they just don't feel important and ties into future complaints. I also feel that they're a little dark and their texture is worse. On the whole, Pikmin 4 sure does love Pikmin 2, and for some reason Pikmin 3 feels like it doesn't get its due and is kind of an afterthought. But what about the new Pikmin? Considering new Pikmin types is always a fun part of speculation because you're basically working from a constantly depleting pool of colors, and this game claims light blue and lime green. Our primary new Pikmin type in 4 is the Ice Pikmin. I've already gone on record saying that the concept of Ice Pikmin is a very easy and commonly thought of choice when it comes to fan Pikmin types, and to be honest, it plays exactly how you would expect it to. Their special attributes are freezing enemies after enough ice is built up and freezing bodies of liquid so that you can traverse it. I'm really torn on the Ice Pikmin. A small quibble is that I don't really like their design. Every other Pikmin has a pretty biological slant to them that makes them feel practical and evolved within the world. But this is a block of ice. Ice is water. How does this work? I mean, fire should insta-kill them, right? I think they could easily have put a really obscured Pikmin body at the core of the ice and had it be like they evolved to have an icy exterior, and I would accept that. Anyway, that's pretty minor compared to the other things I like and dislike. I'd say I pretty universally love the freezing liquid. It plays into what I wanted to see more of, which is allocating Pikmin to stay in spots doing a task that allows for other activities to go on. However, when it comes to having them in your squad for combat, I ultimately found them annoying. It's kinda cute that they essentially replaced Ultra Bitter Spray and gave it to Pikmin instead of needing to harvest it, but losing out on the choice of when to freeze enemies and lose the corpse can lead to awkward and irritating moments of letting Ice Pikmin freeze the enemy, then trying to get them off to stop until they unfreeze so that you can kill them normally and get the corpse. Maybe it's user error, but I think I'd actually prefer having an Ultra Bitter equivalent rather than a Pikmin type taking that role, even if it does make logical sense for Ice. I don't have nearly as mixed feelings about the other new Pikmin type though. Glow Pikmin are introduced as exclusively gathered outside of the main game, positioned as the only Pikmin out at night. Their main claim to fame is that they're basically this game's answer to Bulbmin, having total elemental immunity and being summonable in caves when your numbers are low. They also have a charge ability called Glow Mob, gathering into an explosion that stuns enemies, and will teleport to the captain currently in the player's control. I really don't care for these guys. I kind of think they're a cop-out as a new type, leaving Ice as functionally the only new type in normal play and having a special attack that also annoyed me in practice. The problem is that charge works differently for the two captains, so when you inevitably have to split them up, only one of them actually has access to the ability, making them much less helpful in Ochi's paws. I think this would be easily fixable, having Ochi's charge also having the Glow Mob's exploding stun, but for whatever reason, they didn't do that. But yeah, I don't like the Glow Pikmin. I'll give them 2 things. One, I think if the lore mentioned them evolving to look like Pikmin ghosts so that they didn't get attacked at night, that would be a cute little excuse for their existence, though I'd still like to see tiny wings on them or something. And 2, they really came in handy for the end of the game, so they get some respect for that. But of all the really cool concepts out there for new Pikmin types, this is truly the first Pikmin type that doesn't feel right in the game to me. But enough about individual types, let's talk about how they actually function. A big part of Pikmin 4's design philosophy seems to be smoothing the edges of the franchise. As such, the Pikmin are easier to command than ever before. You pluck them almost instantly after sprouting, you can collect them by walking vaguely near them as opposed to going up and shaking their hands like in the old games. They'll move right along to destroy the next hazard in a group, and they'll generally path smarter, going around corners and not standing or walking too close to danger or ledges. Not everything makes sense in this vein though. Like, I don't really get why wild Pikmin fighting an enemy won't respond to your whistle until you kill the thing. Doesn't really make sense to me. And one of my biggest annoyances about managing the Pikmin actually comes from this philosophy, which is how stubborn the Pikmin are to help and how the game limits your throwing. Pikmin 4 really wants you to know what every Pikmin you throw will do. And so whenever you're throwing Pikmin, the game will yank on your leash and literally stop you from throwing above the needed amount. It's really jarring and annoying to work with. But then even if you do choose to keep throwing after that, or just throw some Pikmin in the area, they sometimes still choose not to help carry something even if there's room. Pikmin choosing to carry something beyond the required number when they're directly next to it or in its path is incredibly inconsistent, and I can't comprehend when the game decides to let them help or just have them stand around like it's their union-mandated lunch break. Hell, even when they do choose to help, the Pikmin are kinda dumber in this game about finding the spot they can actually get to. So you watch your Pikmin run around the thing 5 times before giving up, and then you have to throw a bunch more and hope one gets a clue. Now, in theory, the Pikmin keeping themselves safe and acting more precisely should be a good thing, right? Like, I can't argue that these things, even the throw limit, despite it feeling like the game smacks the controller out of your hand, make it so that you can trust your Pikmin not to mess up your plans and trust the game to make things as clear as possible. What I can argue, though, is that you shouldn't have that trust. This is the Pikmin game that feels least like it's out for blood, and that's solely a detriment. Managing your imperfect idiot Pikmin, primarily in the older games, wasn't a mistake of those games. It was an intentional feature. The whole idea of the Pikmin world is to feel like a natural ecosystem, and the Pikmin little guys who can mess up. That's not bad AI, that is a developmental choice that pushes you to be a better, smarter, and more methodical leader. And if we're getting nitty-gritty with things again, because of the story retcon, the Pikmin shouldn't be this competent anyway. Again, someone who doesn't care about the lore isn't going to accept 20 of their Pikmin walking off a ledge to their death because, in canon, this is the first time they've worked with a captain. But personally, I liked seeing that in every game, the Pikmin got more and more reliable, both as a meta quality of life feature and in the narrative. Now that those two things have split, it doesn't sit as well with me. But I will say again that this is a balancing act. Of course, the newest Pikmin game should remove those frustrating moments where you're truly out of luck and lose Pikmin for no good reason. At the same time, it shouldn't remove the feeling that you need to do everything in your power to keep the Pikmin safe and for your actions to lead to their optimal work. You may have noticed, though, that I have yet to talk about my main what makes Pikmin 4 bad point when it comes to the Pikmin. Here we are. It's building up to 100 Pikmin on the field with Flarlick and being limited to 3 types. How anyone justifies these is completely incomprehensible to me. I don't even know which one I dislike more. Let's just start with Flarlick. First off, small gripe, they look like yellow onions to me. I don't think they're a distinct enough design for how important they are. And I think Nectar and Spicy Spray as a reward past 100 is lazy and unfun. More importantly, anything a game does that removes gameplay and has you upgrade to reach parity is totally backwards and bad design. I feel no joy in raising my Pikmin limit in these small increments. You know what brings me joy? Just playing the game and growing my Pikmin numbers naturally. If I want to do it super fast, great, I can go grow a bunch of Pikmin at the cost of gathering treasure. Or I can push my management and slowly grow my numbers while doing the most possible with my current squad. And even when you are growing your numbers in Pikmin 4, you're not feeling like you are, because you're immediately at a ceiling and you're just watching a number go up in the onion until you can eventually take out more. It's not fun to work back up to the baseline. But hey, at least you can get back to the baseline, unlike with the 3 type limit. Why? This is less fun, plain and simple. Call me crazy, but I think it's fun to see a bunch of different Pikmin types on screen all at once. And also, being prepared. There's some sections where I follow the recommended Pikmin suggestion of the game, a whole other issue, but then had to go all the way back to the landing zone because one specific enemy or treasure required a Pikmin that wasn't recommended, and I couldn't just take out whatever I felt like. or the game tricks you into using candy pop buds instead of being prepared. It makes you either waste time or rely on he who will be talked about later. If I boiled down this Pikmin game's Pikmin problem to one word, it'd be limitations. The throwing, the 3 types, the max Pikmin cap, it all takes away from the natural learning curve and playstyle decisions of the franchise. It's not the game's job to be prepared and to make optimal choices for the player. Sometimes you don't do things the best way the first time, which is why the Pikmin franchise has historically been amazing to replay. The main argument I've heard in favor or defense of these limitations seems to be that it's newcomer friendly. They would claim that with the scope of Pikmin 4, expecting players to manage so many Pikmin and so many types of Pikmin would be too much to handle. This is an argument against hypothetically having 4 captains as well. To that end, I'd like to show you the things that old Pikmin games do that force you to use 100 Pikmin or have every type out in the field.
Nothing.
You know how to not get overwhelmed by 100 Pikmin? Self-regulation. Don't use 100 Pikmin at a time, especially in any Pikmin game after 1, where time is either completely or essentially irrelevant. The same goes for managing over 3 types of Pikmin, or even using 2 or more captains as separate units. Self-regulation. If too many types confuses you, don't bring them all out. If too many captains confuses you, keep them all together. Sure, you're gonna beat the game slower, that's fine. And if you play it again and again and you've pushed that strategy to its breaking point, then maybe you have to start applying your skills to multitasking captains or having more Pikmin numbers or types available. Because that's what the game's about, man. Play to relax or play to win, play however you want. But don't go making a Pikmin game that scraps the intent of the gameplay. Oh, too late. To close this section, I just want to say that while limitation is this game's biggest issue with the Pikmin, the result is that the Pikmin are more gamified than ever before, and basically feel like this game has turned them into ammo. They're just numbers, and having a captain like Presence on PNF 404 stunts their growth in the narrative too. Everything comes together to strip the Pikmin of any personality and quirks and leaves them feeling like unnatural CPU values. They have no fun or cute interactions with the captains, including Olimar. All Pikmin going into a single colored Master Onion feels really bad. It should at least have been translucent or something at first. Because you're not taking 100 Pikmin out, you're growing huge numbers in the Onion that will never matter. And the aforementioned Pikmin suggestions by the game are really the nail in the coffin. It's completely thoughtless. You're no longer spending time learning the environment or being broadly prepared or at most coming back later or replaying to have your types ready. You just let the game make your decisions for you and it works out. You don't think about the Pikmin in your squad, you don't have to worry about their pathing, you don't worry about throwing them. Hell, you don't have to think about the Pikmin at all. The worst instance of this is the suggestions made for caves, where you literally warp Pikmin to and from the Onion at the start and end of a cave. This is one instance of quote-unquote smoothing the edges that I will not stand for. You're telling me you're playing Pikmin and you won't even bother to bring the proper Pikmin to a cave? It's immersion breaking, cheap, and gamified. This is part of the reason why I don't like glow Pikmin too. With the way they're used, they're just another numerical resource. I believe that it is a fundamental flaw that a new installment of the Pikmin franchise doesn't care about making its namesake characters a fleshed out, naturalistic, and interesting part of the game. Alright, big segment time. It's time to talk about the new areas of Pikmin 4, of which there are 6. Well, 6 and a quarter. We'll go through in the order they're presented in the game, starting with... It's not a full area, but it's a crucial spot in the game and one of the first things players are exposed to, so I'm going to talk about the beginning of the game here. It sucks! I hate the prologue of this game so much. This has got to be one of Nintendo's worst first impressions in a long time, and worse than even the much complained about Pikmin 2 intro. I'm primarily going to talk about this in terms of the start of the game and not its function, as we'll get to that down the road. First off, while it's not specific to this area, the Olimar prelude is entirely unnecessary. They truly could have just had Olimar tell his little story, then cut to character customization and added a bit more to teach you the mechanics.
Okay, hi Olimar. You're talking to me directly now.
Instead, they choose to pad out the tutorial for some reason, while keeping things artificially locked off and teasing 100 Pikmin, only to hide it away until dozens of hours of gameplay later. Anyway, one jarring alarm and character customization later, we finally arrive at the command post, and it's really bland. No, I know. It's kinda cute that you can spend time growing some extra Pikmin before you start, but at the same time, I think it's better for that to be part of your day. Overall, it's a really stilted way of introducing you to the game and holds your hand to an infuriating level. And I have no idea why they decided to make you spend something like 40 minutes doing this mind-numbing intro. Compared to something like Breath of the Wild with an incredibly engaging and active tutorial, or even Tears of the Kingdoms, which I'm not even that big a fan of. This is one of the worst starts to a game I've seen in a long time. Getting to our first proper section, Sun-Speckled Terrace introduces us to this game's design, its new approach to caves, and things like Dandori challenges and battles. While the tutorial is still horribly handholdy here, I'll be trying to ignore that to focus on the area as a whole. And I still think this is a really weak area for Pikmin. To start small, I don't like the music. Pikmin can sound like a lot of things and has evolved its sound over the years, but this kind of Breath of the Wildy sparse piano really doesn't land for me. I find it both annoying in its emptiness and in what's there, not liking the chord choices or melody. Just doesn't feel like Pikmin to me. In terms of actual design, this is more about being one of the worst, not because it's bad in itself, but because every other Pikmin sets a very high bar. It's just so nothing. I think its biggest fault is that the pathways are massive for no reason, so the world feels really empty and like the area is large for the sake of being large. It's aesthetically fine, though hurt by the gamified sparkly treasure in the UI. I don't like most of the areas where you're building something as you're just building a shortcut back to an area where you've already done everything. The caves here are all brain dead easy, with the Hectic Hollow's boss being a regular enemy that is a joke to beat. I do think the left segment of the area is pretty good, with a big enemy and a few things to build and collect and work towards, but the upper straight line to a mini-boss is very boring, non-fluid design. The worst thing I could say about it is that it's at its most fun when you set artificial rules for yourself, or in this case, the demo's rules. When I went through a second time to 100% it, I had to make sure to do things in a very specific way so I didn't end the game early, and I actually started to have some fun that way. Any sense of urgency and required thought was nice. Along with that, I think it's fun that you can cheese getting the blue onion without the blues or more Pikmin, even if you don't need to. It's slow going, but feels good to knock out early. Terrace has its positives, but not enough to outweigh how bland it is and how much the area is hurt by being the third part of the tutorial. Next is Blossoming Arcadia, which is kind of my least favorite Pikmin area for no real reason. Realistically, it's not that much different than Terrace, which is kind of the problem. It's another very bland, empty area with a fine but bog standard aesthetic. Its overworld doesn't introduce anything exciting to the game. I don't care for these big mushroom things. I also don't like that berry things show up on the tracker, but then you have to randomly throw Pikmin and wait for them to start digging. This started as an issue in Terrace, but I'm just mentioning it here. There are a handful of things I'll praise for Arcadia, though. I think the introduction of this goo boss in Secluded Courtyard is pretty good. I like the boss overall. The new enemies that start appearing here are decent, and Kingdom of Beasts is the first kind of enjoyable cave in the game. I really like this stealth feeling moment on the 5th level where I pulled away dwarf bull bears before fighting the big one. To its detriment though, I think Empress Bulblax is really tedious in this game. She has way too much health, and having Rock Pikmin negates basically anything scary about her, with her introduction coming right after getting Rock Pikmin only highlighting this. So if there's things I like about Arcadia, why has it held its spot as least favorite in my mind? Well, I think it kind of scorned me. At this point, any semblance of tutorial is over, and yet the game is still like this. The serene feeling of flow throughout the Pikmin game's only vestige here comes from dullness, with a lower bar for success requiring just enough input to feel like you're progressing. It's here where I realized this game evoked absolutely no emotion in me while playing, and that this was not going to be like playing other Pikmin games. I really have nothing else to say about this area. We're 0 for 2. We come to the third area, Serene Shores, and it's really good. I actually like this one a lot. A huge margin more than anything else in Pikmin 4. Aesthetically, it's really great with some nice smaller varied sections among the larger sandy biome. There's good uses of landing zones, making you decide where you want to be and fight to get to them. The sandcastle is an excellent piece of the map, having you fight your way up and battle a cool boss to claim the throne. There's some great enemies and interactions, like the Skeeter Skate shooting you off Ochi, and the Prickle Puff actually being a little nasty, a la older Pikmin games. It's fun that you pull up a surprise Aristocrab in this corner area, and it's a good change that clams die when you beat them. However, what made this area really stand out to me was the low tide mechanic, with more parts of the map becoming accessible at a certain point in the day. This is such a good idea. It makes you think about the area more than any of the others and decide when and how you want to do things, and it makes the world feel alive again at a point where I was sorely missing that. Environmental changes and larger scale elemental effects should have been the crux of areas in Pikmin 4. Maybe a timer goes off and some sprinklers or stovetops start up. Maybe there's a blizzard. Maybe a TV with loose wires turns on and electrocutes an area. Whatever that may have been, it's a massive missed opportunity to not use this kind of mechanic in more areas. But at the very least, it being in shores makes it a standout. And along with that, it generally has the most satisfying caves in the game. Groovy Longlegs is an extremely cute idea for a boss that winds up being pretty fun. And of course, Engulfed Castle is great, though there's only so much credit I can give. Yes, it's designed to be challenging and a little annoying, but in a good Pikmin 2 kind of way, with tough corridors and cheeky spiders screwing up your plans, and this guy just standing there. Menacingly! And our old friend the Water Rat. But that's just it. It's from Pikmin 2. So, like, yeah, it's fun, but I'm not going to praise Pikmin 4 for reusing content for fan service. The caves aren't perfect anyway, though. The giant Wollywog is a completely nothing boss fight. But yeah, on the whole, this is bar none the best area in Pikmin 4, and kind of a favorite of mine in all of Pikmin, which only makes it hurt all the more that they crammed all the cool ideas here and here alone. Coming off of my favorite area, we luckily get maybe my second favorite area in the game, though I would say there's a significant downgrade. Yes, everyone got excited that we'd get to see Pikmin in such definitively human environments. My question is, why? The aesthetic of this area doesn't fit the vibe of Pikmin at all. Why are we playing in this fully pristine house when this is still clearly a post-human Earth? I assume the ambition here was in line with the current marketing philosophy of Pikmin, which is that they want to make it feel like Pikmin could be all around you in the real world, and the magic and imagination within that. But keep that to Pikmin Bloom, please. If Here's Hideaway featured a decrepit house full of rumble and cobwebs with branches and vines breaking through the walls, providing natural walkways to higher areas instead of these random, gamey, artificial platforms, then I'd be way more on board. And these aren't just stylistic complaints either. The fact that it feels like a normal living space means there's very little natural verticality. This gets better in the kitchen, but for the most part, you're just running around an empty square floor. They do try to spice this up by having Moss patrol the floor, and while I appreciate having another larger scale gimmick in the area like Low Tide, it's a decent idea that doesn't get much mileage. You realize pretty quickly that all you have to do is demolish Moss at the start of the day, and then you're fine to play like normal. It'd be cooler if Moss would steal Pikmin or have Pikmin of her own, and actually play Pikmin against you throughout the day, stealing treasure and taking it to a really inconvenient spot. I will say I like the idea of the save though. While I think it'd be better for the game to not tell you what the code numbers were when you find the cards, making you look at the color and number on the cards themselves to figure it out, it's still a fun way to progress towards the initial finale. I also like that the freezer being open lets you find the ice onion and has frozen enemies in the surrounding area. That's just cute. It would have been fun to push that even more aesthetically, maybe split the whole kitchen between fires roaring from the stove and a completely frozen area near the fridge. And the caves here are okay, but back to being hit or miss. Plunder Palace is overall a pretty good cave, working your way up to the dining table to get all the treasure. But the different bread bug behavior in Pikmin 4 is pretty lame. Because they don't have a den, there's no more concern about losing Pikmin or treasure, which makes them much less interesting and tense. And the ice boss found in Frozen Inferno is a little annoying, with a weird hitbox that makes your pine cones miss. Overall though, is it the worst area? No. I was still having more fun here than half the other areas. I think it's just a lot of missed opportunities. I do wish that 100%ing everything up to this point didn't spoil that there were areas after this though. The game sure does keep going. The tone's a little unfair though. I don't actually dislike this area that much outside of some larger picture things. The music might be my favorite area theme, sounding much more in line with Pikmin 3. I think Blue Pikmin dealing with sprinklers is a pretty cute obstacle. Climbing up the brick oven is a pretty good section, though not as fluid and rewarding as the sandcastle. Most of my notes from Hearth actually come from the caves. Dream House is a cute cave, bringing back the safe mechanic and having the captains work separately. Cradle of the Beast has this 300 weight ham, which is, I think, the first time a cave presents you with a treasure that you might not be able to get if you play poorly, so yay challenge. And the Man-at-Legs is fun to fight again. He's been a bit nerfed, but having destructible walls and areas where he can hit you if you're riding Ochi is a cool touch. I did have some negative notes about caves though. There was this annoying conveyor moment that killed a couple Pikmin, and in general there's a few moments in caves here that let you completely ignore your captain in Pikmin, which just sucks. But generally I don't have a lot to say about this area. At this point I was hitting max burnout and was on autopilot just trying to get through the game. Having the most areas is touted as a benefit of Pikmin 4, but to me, it only really serves to bloat the experience. That aside, again, Hearth is fine. However, it is insanely linear for a Pikmin area, having you walk in a straight line to complete the area. But because this is a design choice on the part of Pikmin 4 and not just this area, being made linearly actually works decently in its favor to make it enjoyable. My problem with its linearity comes from a broader issue I'll discuss about Pikmin 4, but we still have one more area to talk about. Primordial Thicket is whatever. Much like Hearth, I was so burnt out at this point that a lot of the nuances of the areas were rolling off of me. They weren't as boring as the first two, but nowhere near as interesting as the middle two. It's less linear than Hearth, but has maybe the most annoying environmental factor in the area and its caves: mud. The problem is that there's two kinds of mud. There's mud that slows you down, and mud that kills you like water. And the real problem is that I found it super hard to tell the difference. It doesn't appear frequently enough to become a readable obstacle, but just enough to screw me up and nearly make me rewind time again and again and again. By far the most annoying environmental factor introduced in the game. And there's a bunch of other stuff that generally disgruntled me here. The fact that the game introduces enemies out of order means that a lot of this area lacks impact, there's more weak cave bosses, and even stuff I like from caves is once again pulled from Pikmin 2. I swear this game is just Pikmin 2, but like, not even in a cheap suit and mustache, but potato sacks. However, it does get a lot of points back because of Cavern for a King, the final cave in the game. This is a massive trial that's executed really well, with great pacing and some tough challenges that made Glow Pikmin immensely worth it. I would not have made it through without them. What I like is that even though it's a tough cave, it's not just going to cheaply kill your Pikmin in one mistake or annoying random contrivance. It's death by 1,000 cuts, slowly depleting more and more Pikmin until you need glows and then run out of glows and have to muscle through. That's exactly how caves should be, getting more and more tense as you go along while not making you afraid of Murphy's Law. I like the Crusted Rump Up on sub level 8. I started getting careless as things went, causing losses on 13 and 17. For 17, I found it kind of an annoying Empress fight, but the losses were for sure my fault. Fighting the Sovereign Bulblax on 18 is cool because he causes puddles as the fight goes on, reminiscent of the Myclops in 3. And the final boss is solid, making you work with different types until a point where you truly have to fight to survive against Gloom. The only thing I don't like about the cavern is that Rock and Winged Pikmin are completely excluded from the finale of the game. Again, Pikmin 4 is embarrassed to admit they exist. But at the end of the day, despite my mixed feelings, this was a really solid ending to the game, and I was satisfied to be done it. Wait, there's more? Why? On December 11th, 2023, several months after I finished the game, I was skimming through some of Scruffy's streams. I had previously seen that you could customize as a Leafling, but skipped the dialogue for that and never did it and didn't feel like going back. However, I then saw the captain carrying an item with a Pikmin, which I had either never seen or must have thought it was a mod or something. I then learned about the extra hand and the fact that Louis had some dumb side missions to unlock it at the literal end of the post-game. There is no point to this. It's a fun enough concept for an upgrade, but why have it at a time when it actually truly means nothing? There's not even an indication that you're missing anything. It's just worthless content. Anyway, in April of this year, I went back to do it because I refused to have anyone call me out for not giving this game enough time. Besides getting a kinda interesting log about having sympathy for the big boss dog and some good chatting with Almar with interesting implications about humans, it's entirely dull and pointless and unnecessarily bloats your date count. And it's lame that you can't find the things wherever and have to go to specific spots. And so many months after I rolled credits, I wasted an hour doing menial tasks so I could unlock this. Amazing. So, why are Pikmin 4's areas bad for the franchise? Despite having okay areas, one I really like, and some of the weakest in the franchise, they all share the same design issues. Pikmin 4 only moves forward. This game cares about progression and absolutely nothing else. negatively impacting so many core aspects of Pikmin. Prior Pikmin games had a lovely layout with several circles looping into one another and to the central landing zone. Because these areas themselves are a straight line, especially Giant's Hearth, you never get the feeling that you're conquering the area or learning and developing your skills. This kind of linearity should be used in caves, which are their own condensed challenges that are supposed to be a bit harder, not in the main areas. The linearity not only applies to area layout, but also to literal progression forward through the game. You're not only not doubling back in areas because of the design, you can also 100% every single area without going somewhere else. To me, this is so deeply un-Pikmin. It's a staple to do what you can in the area with the tools you're provided, explore new areas, and come back at least once when you've gathered the necessary Pikmin or captains. But now, part of the reason most of the areas don't have a positive impression on me is because they never contain any mystery or excitement for the future. And the final piece of this is something that's been hard not to bring up yet, and I almost moved this to its own negative point at the end of the video. Did you realize that I didn't bring up enemies in the individual areas all that specifically? Well, that's because I barely remember what's in each area, because enemies never respawn when you kill them. I'm not kidding when I say this is one of my biggest issues with the game. I despise this. This is another reason why dealing with ice became a stress point. An integral part of playing Pikmin is dealing with enemies day by day, knowing that enemies might stay dead for a little bit but will eventually return, meaning you have to chart your course and manage your time carefully. But now, who cares? The game essentially encourages you to walk forward, napalm the area, and be done with it, never giving it a second thought ever again. It doesn't just feel bad from a gameplay standpoint, it straight up doesn't feel like Pikmin. Again, Pikmin has always had respect for the natural ecosystem of PNF 404, and its enemies were maybe the most important part of that. You were living in their world, and you had to figure out how they worked and what made them tick to make your Pikmins work as easy as possible. In Pikmin 4, there's no respect for that natural life cycle. Just have fun committing your war crimes and never worry about your Pikmin's pathing ever again. So what does this all add up to? No replayability. Pikmin has always had an arcadey element of puzzly time trial, figuring out how to play the best you can on repeat playthroughs. The dance of Pikmin revolves around going back to areas and managing the enemies' respawns and habits. Even Pikmin 1 had really interesting takes on this, having different enemies show up depending on when you come back to certain areas. That kind of care is fully absent from Pikmin 4. Even Pikmin 2, which doesn't have the importance of time that 1 and 3 have, still puts emphasis on improving your performance, keeping your Pikmin numbers high and spending as little time as possible to prepare to move forward. But in Pikmin 4, you never have to worry about that either. You do whatever is put in front of you, kill every living thing you see, never engage your brain, and never return to past areas. So why bother coming back to the game at all? There's no incentive to improve, so all you get is an overly long and simplistic adventure game. Before I lay out the rest of my negatives, I do want to be fair and bring up everything else I liked about Pikmin 4. Like I said, as a game, Pikmin 4 isn't bad in itself, and it does some things that are pretty good, and some things that I actually really enjoy. Some things I'll just mention briefly, and some I'll go into a bit more. To blast through some smaller positives, again, Serene Shores is a top tier Pikmin area. The new camera is pretty much exactly what I had hoped. The sound design is generally very pleasant and crisp, and the music does have its moments like Giant's Hearth or the weird little instrumental that plays when you're close to enemies, though I did enjoy some of it more at 2x speed. The survey drone is a great concept, but is overemphasized for how little it matters in this game's priorities. The kill gates are a cool concept. Pellets stopping their rotation when Pikmin attacks so you don't miss the color you want is a nice quality of life update. Although it contributes to the linearity, I do fundamentally like the multiple landing zones and that your Pikmin move with them, though I think choosing which to start at the start of the day would be even better. I also like the quicker Pikmin selection with the bigger increments. Customizing your D-pad shortcuts is a fantastic choice that makes gameplay so much smoother and faster. And while many caves are too easy, I do think Pikmin 4 tremendously improves caves. There's far less random trickery meant to unfairly kill your Pikmin, enemies aren't randomly splattered around the caves as cruelly as possible, and their much shorter length outside of a few tailor-made challenges is exactly what I wanted to see from the return of caves. If they were a little consistently harder and showed the slower passage of time, they'd be set as a bright spot of the game. To get into my bigger likes, I think Alamar's Shipwreck Tale and Trial of the Sage Leaf were really great additions. Let's cover Shipwreck first. Now, yes, partially I like this mode because it's like playing normal Pikmin, but No, that's why I like Shipwreck Tale. It makes the abhorrent retcon sting a little less because at least I still get to play a good version of the game, annoying as it is to be locked behind the save file. But yeah, it's abridged, bastardized Pikmin 1, which is still Pikmin 1, so it's fun. Hearing old themes is really nice. I like this little Snagret trap reference, and having a time limit really makes the difference. I do have my issues with it though. I think the way you unlock abilities and upgrades day by day is weird and unnatural. I don't know why they didn't either just give you the suite from the start or have you find items in game. More importantly, I don't really like that things are remixed from how you find them in the normal game. It feels like unlocking this should give you the ultimate test of your abilities in those 4 areas, using the knowledge you've gained so far to go in and be able to conquer them within this strict time limit. Instead, things are so moved around that you don't really get that satisfaction. I totally get the concept of remixing this so it isn't stale, and I think remixing enemies is just fine, but I would have preferred item placement and obstacles be basically the same. Lastly, going back to the intro, I really don't like that clashes with what you do in this mode. Like, this is supposed to be what happened, right? This is his story. So then if I missed one of the Flarlocks in Arcadia, it makes no sense that I suddenly have 100 Pikmin in Hideaway just because the intro says I do. Again, the intro and Hideaway just shouldn't have existed, both for the tutorial and for this purpose. But let's move on to something I really enjoyed, being the Trial of the Sage Leaf. I already mentioned that I like that white and purple onions are your rewards for this, and that's because this is a really tough, worthy challenge. I played through this once to just complete it and once to platinum everything, and both times I found myself really grinding it out and appreciating the struggle. On basically every level after 3, I had to put in a ton of time, especially for the plat. This really gets things back to basics and forces you to think about the strengths of the team you have available. My personal favorite level is 8. It's just so well designed and tight. I like 5's fight for the white onion a bit more than the purple. I think using the water wraith again is fine, but I prefer simply a tough Pikmin oriented objective and using multiple types when it works best. 2 issues though. For one, level 7 sucks. This might be the worst moment in the entire game, in any Pikmin game. I'll have to talk more about this in a minute because of the reason it's so bad, but it's just a lazy, unfun concept that doesn't work and doesn't fit in with the extremely tight, tailored challenges in the rest of the trial. And secondly, this might be the highest point of difficulty in the game, and when the difficulty cranks up, the cracks of the game really start to show. Again, talk about that more in a minute, but I did really enjoy this part of the game. And lastly, kind of tied into this, my favorite thing about Pikmin 4, bar none, are Dandori challenges. Now, again, I don't love that it's locked behind a save file, but this was such a highlight for me that it raises the game's score up a solid point or 2 in my mind. These were some of the only times that I felt like I had blood going through my body. It's such a stark difference to the rest of the gameplay that you kind of have to wake up to playing real Pikmin design again. It goes back to treating the Pikmin as priority number 1, forcing you to carefully consider them in order to do the best you can, whether that be platting or just passing. As far as I remember, I thoroughly enjoyed every single Dandori challenge. The challenges at Serene Shores is where I really had to start cooking with test tubs and especially Ice Crawl's course, which provided me the singular highest moment of joy and appreciation for Ice Pikmin in the whole game.
Oh, wait. That's Don Dory, baby.
Hefty Hallway was a real hell of a challenge for me. Aerial Incinerator and Strategic Freezeway are a bit of a step back in difficulty after dealing with the Sage Leaf, but planning pools and toggle training start turning the heat back up, and Cliffhanger's Hold and Oasis of Order rounded off my time with the challenges with top tier intense Dandori action. And then the Dandori battles are alright. They can still be fun and take a couple of tries to plat, but they're nowhere near the elation of Dandori challenges. Outside of their occasional tenseness, they're generally a little lifeless and don't feel like natural portions of the game, even in comparison to the isolated environments of caves and challenges. They're just a little limited in their scope to be memorable, but I think the concept is fun and not the worst in execution. My only real complaint about the 2 of them is that they are so separated from the core game. They display so clearly that the Pikmin team still has the sauce and can still make fantastic Pikmin puzzles, but they're utilized in such a way that locks away the brightest moments of the game from the core experience, while also unnaturally interrupting that experience. This too hurts the replayability, as there would be more drive to replay the game if the challenge's excellence was distilled throughout the whole campaign like it is in Pikmin 1 through 3, rather than having the option to just replay the challenges from the home base of my main save. And they should really have leaderboards for this kind of thing to see how others, or at least your friends, are doing. Regardless, the game is the way it is, and as it is, Dandori challenges are truly wonderful and show what Pikmin can still be. Alright, now that my excess positivity has been spent, it's time to bring this thing home. I've already covered 3 massive issues with Pikmin 4 as a Pikmin game. The retcon to the story renders characters impactless and the world less interesting, the limitations to Pikmin make them feel like artificial elements of a game that forgets them as what should be its focus, and the areas lack any freeform spirit or liveliness with no enemies to return to, thus giving the game less replay value. Truly, these are some of my biggest issues with the game, but there are still more issues big and small to cover. I'll go through the rest of my problems with the game from least to most important, starting pretty small scale. The first menu loop is lame and flat and feels like stock footage. Doesn't elicit any emotion from me. This also comes from the weakest Pikmin menu theme to date. Again, that piano sound doesn't work for me for Pikmin at all. Pikmin 4's co-op literally tells us to kick rocks. Well, pitch them anyway. After 3 finally realized 2-player control over multiple captains, Pebble Pitcher as this incredibly half-baked helper mode is the biggest step back imaginable. It's not even a step, it's a jump off the Empire State Building. And the 2-player Dandori battles are a massive letdown too. Because it's limited to the Dandori battle stages used in the campaign, it's an incredibly one-and-done offering. My friend and I tried it for about 15 minutes, got bored, and went to play Pikmin 2's, which is so much more robust. Even Bingo Battle, which I was never the biggest fan of, has so much more if you want to dive into it. Well, at least I have no incentive to make anyone else suffer this game with me. This one is more confusing to me than anything else. Instead of linking castaways to their specific caves, you instead find them in a predetermined order every time, hand-holding the flow of the narrative. I have no idea why they chose to have it like this, or how they think it benefits the game. It's another massive slam to replayability and creates this false sense of decision-making. Ideally, if you want to finish the game in fewer days on a repeat, you should be able to beeline straight to the important caves. This would naturally set up a trade-off of, sure, you can finish the game quicker, but maybe the other castaways give you upgrades or create new sources of resources. So how do you want to spend your time? As it is, it's just another choice that actively makes the game duller and less engaging. I have a fair amount of complaints with the entire visual presentation of this game. Sure, the lighting is nice. Sure, most of the textures are pretty good. I'm mostly concerned, as the title suggests, with the animation and the interface. The animation in Pikmin 4 is probably the worst in the series. I blame a lot of this, maybe unfairly, on the switch to Unreal Engine. I have this really weird personal bias because of all those stupid "look what Mario could be in Unreal Engine" clickbait videos, and now whenever I see movement or defaulty feeling aspects, I just blame it on the engine. Not Unreal's fault, but I do think the switch from a custom engine was a detriment. The Captain and Pikmin animations are so stilted here. In general, they're too mechanical when starting and stopping movement and turning around. They don't have the natural cadence of past Pikmin games that make them feel more flowy and less like animatronics. Sure, did Pikmin 3 Deluxe have perfect animations all the time? No. That definitely started to push the Pikmin's animations a little too far in favor of accessibility. But this is the closest we've ever been to the Captains in Pikmin, and they did not up their animation game to match. Throwing sometimes looks straight up awful. The end of day march is completely lifeless. It looks like they're on their way to the firing squad. And I would say the most consistently bad animation here goes to moving from one sub-level to another in caves. You can't leave it looking like that. People will laugh at you. This is short like 4 levels of polish. Look at this weird, ugly lighting shift. Like, come on. Show me anything that looks this bad in 3 Deluxe. I'll wait. As for the UI, it's the most sterile and lifeless Pikmin has ever been. I get that 3 started to move away from the very GameCube, quirky fonts and bubbles and menus, but even that still kept the feeling of Pikmin. This, again, feels default. The aesthetic is garbage, completely flat and uninspired, especially when it comes to things like area selection and reading missions. Animations like Investigation Complete look amateur, and things like the lack of Pikmin graph at the end of the day show they weren't concerned with having fun with this part of the game. It's not just static elements though. If anything, the UI during the game is far more intrusive, and not just visually bad, like literally intrusive.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm in the middle of something. Yes, I know where all my Pikmin are.
Shut up.
Shut up. It's the same goddamn text every time.
There is so much visual noise and bulb shit constantly cluttering your screen. I don't think the characters would be nearly as bad if they would shut the hell up for 2 seconds and not block the dead center of your screen where you're trying to, I don't know, play the game. The most offensive to me is for sure the controls popping up if you decide not to move for a millisecond. God forbid you try to take in some of the nice lighting and check out the environment. Gotta make sure you know how to play the game, you E for everyone idiot. But it's always something. The controls, character banter, telling you a task is complete, showing you pictures of the treasure, showing you treasure collections, telling you Pikmin died, telling you about raw materials, telling you to end the day early because you better not be doing anything but making forward progression. Just stop. Please let the game breathe for a minute. And even if it's not in your face, they still make unnecessary visual changes, like adding the Pikmin state ID pictures to the end of your cursor. We have it colored for each Pikmin. You have a limited number of types at a given time. You don't need this. If you're gonna make the game feel more gamey than ever, you have to at least make it nice to look at. Listeners with the keen senses of a bull bear might have caught that I didn't mention one central element of this game's main modes, and that's because night missions are the most forgettable gameplay that has ever been executed in Pikmin. I wished I was executed while playing it. Okay, maybe that's a little dramatic, but this part of the game is worthless, full stop. Like I said, I forgive Glow Pikmin's existence because they came in handy later in the game, but I'd much rather we'd scrap this entire train of thought for nighttime gameplay. You walk around and mash A. It's mindless. There's a hint of hope when 2 luminals get introduced, at least meaning you have to occasionally switch back and forth between captains, but since Glow Pikmin teleport to the current captain, the only thing that ever presents a challenge are the absolute hardest bosses towards the end. The truth is that I've always had my reservations about nighttime gameplay in Pikmin. Leaving at the end of the day is such an important piece of what makes Pikmin work in terms of narrative and pacing, and I've never really understood the fascination of fans with trying to insert it into the structure. I found it hard to balance in my own ideas for a new Pikmin. I do think that a lot of my fears about night gameplay came to pass, and I really don't like that night missions count towards your day count for no reason. But I don't think nighttime gameplay would be impossible to do in a way that preserves the flow of the game while still exploring new avenues for Pikmin. However, I do think that no matter how you approach it, even if you keep the mission structure, it has to use your normal Pikmin. Having a dedicated specialized type of Pikmin for this mode turns it into an inferior Dandori challenge, is another thing making Pikmin feel artificial, and removes any stakes that being out at night should have. Having to be even more careful about how you use Pikmin and how many you'll have available at night would lend the mode some importance, and you could still keep it as the means of getting cures or even getting resources to help you in caves. I think you could easily remove Glow Pikmin, add another well-rounded type, and get rewards for completing these challenges with beefed out enemies that allow you to multiply Pikmin, kind of like a Queen Candy Pop button. Unfortunately, as is, night missions are the most forgettable addition in Pikmin 4 and the dullest form of Pikmin gameplay in any of the games. Talking about night missions was kind of a precursor to the next and final 3, as they're something I really don't care for but are separate enough to not taint the good parts of this game. But now these are all my other biggest issues with Pikmin 4 that make it bad in fundamental and unavoidable ways. The rescue command post is poison to this game. At its most base functionality, it's the most glorified, bloated menu I've ever seen in a video game. Stop and really think about what you do here and how you interact with things. Everybody is either granting you access to a menu or an achievement, but instead of navigating to things on a snappy, clear text menu before starting the day, you have to run over to a character, get the most generic dialogue imaginable like "I love science," and then open the menu you wanted to see in the first place. Same goes for the achievements. Go to the character, waste precious moments of your time with lifeless characters, and get the resource. Even while the game lets you warp right to people, you still have to go through this rigmarole, saving essentially no time. It's the worst of both worlds. Too slow for a menu, too uninteresting for world building. All of these kinds of things should have been accessible in the quick menu, and if you want to go listen to these characters for reasons I can't grasp, then you can spend the time to do so. I also just don't like this area as an element of the gameplay. It brings me no joy to see all the castaways fill up the space and be there for your takeoff, because they all have zero personality, and I have real life friends. And the area of your base expanding doesn't do anything helpful from a practical standpoint. If you're really filling the outpost out as you save more people, you should be rewarded with something like more pellets or eggs of nectar. And what's the good goddamn reason for not taking off at night, huh? Why did they change that for no apparent reason? As far as I can tell, Nightfall is explained extremely poorly in this. I'm not even sure it's mentioned in logs about the Onion. I could be wrong, but the ship not taking off and accompanying them erases the whole point of leaving for safety and why night is scary. And it was dynamic visually too. Pikmin 3's is especially great, getting the cool liftoff and then peering through the window while the end of day log starts. With so many characters and attempts at endearing us to them as they chat inside the ship, why are we not seeing them through the windows? Pick 2 characters for each interaction, put 2 windows in the frame, bing bang boom, engaging visuals. But no, let's stare at the same static image at the end of every day. If night missions involved occasionally defending the ship since we're not taking off, I'd give it a little credit. But like I said, it's a meaningless change just to handle something worse. Outside of its mere existence, the home base also signifies 2 other weak areas in the game. The first is the whole concept of resources and upgrades in this game, as the base acts as your main mode of gaining new tools and abilities. Sparklium being tied to treasures is a cheap excuse to put treasures back in the game when, before, they had a real palpable value in the world. And raw materials is dumb on principle. You couldn't come up with anything? Any fun name for this new element of the world? Just video game resource. Every time it comes up with its dumb little emoji, it looks stupid. As with many things in Pikmin 4, it feels lifeless and gamified. Having bridges or pathways be tied to specific chunks you had to find was A1 okie dokie by me. Now raw material fills that role, and also acts as currency at the store in your home base, where you can shop for all the items you used to be able to find through achievement and success in playing the game. Just because there's so many upgrades and items you can buy doesn't mean that equates to bringing additional strategy to the game. There's a difference between strategy and things that make the game easier. And even so, I don't know how much strategy you can get out of these items when half of everything does the same thing anyway. You stun enemies or damage enemies. Sometimes the thing that hurts them moves, sometimes the stun is freezing them. Either way, I don't think we need pick carrots and ice bombs and ice Pikmin and lightning and Ochi's charge and globe mob, all in essence to stun enemies. But going back to upgrades, because that's more offensive to me, it's so much cooler when these things are found by beating bosses or discovering them in the world and needing to bring them back. Now you can buy them or get them via repetitious tasks. These aren't just cool features either. These are core controls that were essential functions of past games, like the charging horn needing to be unlocked to use charge. In some cases though, it's not the means of getting them that irks me, it's when you get them. You don't get to buy the Pluckaphone equivalent until you've bought everything else in the store, meaning you won't get it until the game is close to over. And I didn't get the lineup trumpet, which I remind you was a base ability in Pikmin 1 and 2 as Swarm until, let me check my notes. After the game is over. Who in their right mind thought this would be fun or rewarding? It serves no purpose this way because, again, the game is over. If there was a new game plus, that would at least let you use everything you've gotten to trounce the entire game, but for whatever reason, there's not. It's basically just lip service for any fans willing to give a shit. These late game unlocks tie into the other flaw that the Outpost brings us, being the pacing of the game. So, in fairness, when you're just in the world and playing the game, the pacing of gameplay is alright. I don't like the lengthening of days that caves and Dandori stuff causes, but I've never liked caves and other people do, so I'm not going to hold that against the game. Plus, caves are a much better length now. It's the getting to each day that quickly becomes an issue. The amount of bloat and filler and pure time in between days is maddening. In Pikmin 1 and 2, you leave for the day, get your log and daily recap, then load into the next day and pick where you want to go. Pikmin 3 expands this section a little bit, but is still basically the good version of 4. You go up, maybe see some onions merge, get a log and recap, then start your next day with some short, relevant dialogue, and you're right on the area select screen. If you really want, you can check out some other things or listen to some short banter between captains. Even though there's more emphasis on characters, the game knows what the focus of the game should be. In Pikmin 4, after every day or night mission, you take off, loading screen, land at the base, see your results on multiple pages, get your conversation in the ship, see your missions, start the next day, get additional interruptions about curing leaflings or Ochi growing or a team goddamn pep rally, do all the shit I already complained about in the home base, and then finally choose what you're going to do.
Slow. So slow. Let me play the game.
I took a random reading of the time on day 8, which showed about 6 minutes in between the end of day and setting off to an area, as opposed to under 2 at a more story-heavy moment of Pikmin 3. That time really compounds, and the cycle becomes draining very quickly. Other things like black transitions in areas don't help the pacing either, though that was in 3 a lot as well. A game from 2013. There is one more culprit in the case of the exorbitant downtime and pacing issues: the load times. They're awful. Simply put, they are awful.
The loading screens, man. Brutal.
A game of this scale, with one of the bigger file sizes of any Nintendo game on Switch, should not take this long to load. It's not accounting for procedural generation or environmental effects. Nintendo's not taking its graphics to new heights with this game. Whether it's between days or entering areas or coming and going from caves, it's constant and it's a nightmare. On stream, I constantly found myself at a loss for words at how long loading would take. Let's run a little test. I'm going to compare entering an area in Pikmin 4 to entering an area in Pikmin 2 and 3. I'm also going to compare it to Fast Travel in Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo's other big release in 2023. And you know what? To be totally unfair, let's put Fast Travel in Spider-Man 2 and Leaving Camp in Baldur's Gate 3 on PlayStation 5 up there. Both massive games that came out in 2023. For as much as the gaming community complains, how is this kind of thing not setting people off? And instead of attempting to fix the issue, they added a loading bar. I know load times aren't the home base's fault, but in tandem with everything else the Outpost does wrong, it's just more and more stuff stopping you from playing the game and feeling rewarded for your work. While I've mostly been coming down on things that I think make Pikmin 4 a bad Pikmin game, while that's also true here, I do feel this is something that makes it a bad game, period. This is the worst feeling Pikmin game to play purely from a control standpoint. Some things are lesser than others. I already talked about the Pikmin throw cap, as well as charge and glow mobs issues between captains, and some other one-tap commands feel slow and unresponsive. The Y menu in particular is really clunky, which is why those D-pad shortcuts are so good in the first place. If that wasn't an option, needing to use the menu constantly would have been absolutely painful. But even then, the D-pad shortcuts aren't the snappiest thing. None of this compares to the auto lock though. The reticle automatically locking onto things is a non-negotiably bad thing for Pikmin 4. It should never have been the default way to play, and it certainly shouldn't have been the only option. It's so aggressive and hard to manage that it fully removes any control and precision you have over how you operate with your Pikmin, essentially hijacking the most fundamental part of playing a Pikmin game. As soon as you're trying to do more than 2 things at once or work with the barest amount of finesse, the game starts trying to play itself for you. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said that if gameplay amps up at all, the cracks start to form. This is the biggest crack, and it shows nowhere clearer than level 7 of Trial of the Sage Leaf. Throughout the game, dealing with surprise crowds of enemies like grubs or leaves was already exacerbating my distaste for the game and the auto-lock, but it culminated in a challenge specifically designed to piss me off. I really cannot imagine programmers, designers, directors, producers, playtesters all looking at this and thinking, yeah, seems good to me. You can't play the game! You have no control, and your best bet is to frantically wave around and mash whistle and pray to God things work out. And to be clear, even with decent controls, this would be a dumb and lazy challenge, but at least then you'd feel some semblance of control. Objectively speaking, the controls were the most frustrating thing about playing the game to me. How fans are hand-waving this as, oh, I don't mind it, or yeah, it's a little annoying and I'd prefer it to be an option, but it's fine, is wild to me. And here we are, at the final thing that makes Pikmin 4 bad in my opinion. This one goes all the way to the top. a critical choice in the making of this game that's branches corrupted the game. Ochi is the root cause for a lot of this game's biggest issues. The home base and the controls may have been the most repeatedly grating and unpleasant aspects of the game, but even while you do get used to Ochi over time, you cannot ignore the negative impact he has on the core of Pikmin. I will allow for some positives before I elaborate. I do think that the concept of a Captain Pikmin hybrid character could be interesting, and as he functions in this game, he has moments where that premise shows its merits. Those moments are naturally in the Dandori challenges because, of course they are, everything good in this game is. But when the gameplay really starts to cook and you actually have to utilize Ochi to his fullest potential, whether it be splitting off with Pikmin or handling things himself, you start to see what they had in mind. And, I don't know what else I can say here. I guess there were some endearing moments. Him trying so hard when he was small and getting sick when trying to leave did elicit real empathy for him.
I'm not crazy about Ochi as a whole thing, but god damn it, you can't not get me with a sad dog.
But that's not his doing. I just like dogs. So sure, I guess Pikmin 4's marketable mascot emotionally manipulated me. That's all I got. My earliest issues came with Ochi's design. This creature does not say Pikmin to me at all. He just barks. He's honestly one of the least Pikmin designs I can think of in the whole series, coming across as designed to be generically cute and approachable and make internet sludge people go, oh, what a cute doggo, what a good boy. Again, certified dog lover, and I ain't buying it. Even the vague glimpses we've gotten into dogs in this universe in the past have fit the vibe much better. There have been statements and concept art in the past of a captain taming and riding something like a Bulborb, and honestly, I think this would fix a lot of my problems instantly. It doesn't have to be a Bulborb, it can be something new for this game, but something that exists on the planet and follows the general aesthetic of the wildlife would go a long, long way. It makes way more sense to be a native creature to the planet anyway. It'd make Ochi and Moss helping the captains navigate the world and commanding Pikmin feel more organic. Sure, maybe the captains would still have less impact on the Pikmin, but imagine finding a runty little Bulpchi at the beginning of the game and getting him to the point where he stays on the planet to successfully lead the Pikmin, kinda nodding to Pikmin 1's arc for the Pikmin. It also implies more separation from the captain as an entity, limiting the scope of its abilities to its unique skill set. Immediately, I am more interested in this concept. Alas, we have to deal with this. His design brings forth some horrible animations. As I said earlier, his throw is one of the worst looking things in the game. I also found his swallowing carry confusing for a while, stopping him mid-carry because I thought he was just running around doing nothing. But complaints about Ochi's design are small potatoes compared to the actual deep-seated issues of the character. I feel that at his most on-paper design level, Ochi is there to make up for the player's shortcomings, not to offer a tool for player excellence. Most of this comes from the ability to ride on Ochi. Like I said before, controlling the Pikmin's movement to keep them safe was a core part of the game, and Pikmin 4 already took strides to make that easier. But instead of trying it all, just put them on the dog. I mean, why would you ever choose not to decrease your team's footprint massively, minimizing your risk and maximizing your travel and abilities at any given time? This strangle holds the gameplay loop, along with Ochi's abilities. Rush can be cool, I will admit. It's nice later on to one-shot smaller enemies, and the stun is useful. But from the second you start the Alamar tutorial, you see just how much rushing an enemy, stunning them, and shotgunning every Pikmin onto them takes over every second of combat. There's no point to ever try. Again, why would you not constantly use the most powerful thing you can do in the whole game? And when it comes to treasure or castaways or anything, same thing. Why bother trying? No matter what, just tell Ochi to find it and he'll bring you to its exact location. And the game makes damn sure that you're thinking about Ochi at any given second, with what I can only assume is the voice of God saying, Ochi is trying to tell you something, or your team chattering about him nonstop. All of this, all of his abilities and the role he has in the game poses an excuse to be ill-prepared with your Pikmin skills, and hijacks a game that is supposed to be all about Dandori with Dogdory. This happens also through Ochi completely erasing the relevance of the captain and Pikmin. As a captain, Ochi is literally better in every way. The only thing he can't do is a proper charge separate from his rush. But his rush does damage and stuns, so who cares? With the amount of skills Ochi has that the normal captain doesn't, it can be a major inconvenience to split the two up in most circumstances unless you're absolutely sure what the path holds, making you want to stick together, at which point you ride Ochi and the captain fades away. As I said, it serves more of a purpose in challenges, but in normal gameplay with no day limit, you might as well not split up and take things a little slow to play with the ideal team members on hand. And when I say Ochi erases the Pikmin, I mean it. Ochi steals the purpose of every single Pikmin. Along with his design, this was one of my earlier worries, and it was proven tenfold. Through upgrades, Oatchi has immunity to every element. He does more damage in a fight like red Pikmin. He traverses and can go into water like blue Pikmin. He uses his rush to get items from tall spaces where yellow Pikmin would go, which for the record took so long to click in my brain because that's literally what yellow Pikmin are for. He carries items faster and through rough terrain like white Pikmin. Oatchi can carry for up to 100 Pikmin instead of using purple Pikmin. He can carry for 100 Pikmin. He can attack flying enemies like winged Pikmin. He shatters obstacles, which technically rock Pikmin should be doing, though for some reason they don't in the case of pots. And if you're looking at their special abilities on paper, he can stun enemies like ice and glow Pikmin. It ties back into what I was saying about compensating for the player. Instead of being punished for losing too many Pikmin or bringing the wrong types, Oatchi is here to fill every possible crack in the foundation. And finally, as I said at the top, I think that when Oatchi was conceptualized, most of this game's biggest problems followed, or at least Oatchi is the worst signifier of them. Oatchi and Moss are responsible for the retcon's worst impacts, removing the relationship between captains and the Pikmin planet. The Pikmin have zero fun interactions with the captains, but they sure do love the dogs. Likewise, the captains don't really care about the Pikmin, only the dogs. They're treated like the only thing that matters. In fact, they're actually the crux of the plot, responsible for the story of Pikmin 4 happening in the first place. Oatchi taking every Pikmin's job and allowing them to huddle up on him makes them fully feel like ammo because you're not managing them as living beings. I also firmly believe that his all-around abilities are part of the reason we got the 3-type limit and the Floralic upgrades. I can see the thought process clearly. We have large maps and caves in Pikmin 4, and 8 to 9 Pikmin types to deal with throughout the game. That might be too much for the players to handle. Oh, I know. Let's make Oatchi be able to do everything. That way, you won't have to worry as much about dealing with 100 Pikmin or too many types, because you can condense that down into one additional character. I can't really see any other reason for Oatchi to take so much from the Pikmin's individual roles. It's so not a single player can possibly feel overwhelmed by their own choices. The linear designs of everything outside of Dandori challenges feels like it's made for Oatchi too. Again, the game encourages you to get on Oatchi and ride into the sunset for every occasion, so having a straightforward design and obstacles that require Oatchi self-fulfills that prophecy. And even in talking about the rescue outposts as a means of upgrading your characters, so too does Oatchi play a role in the game's negative impact on Pikmin gameplay. I brought up captain upgrades and items, but I didn't talk about the Oatchi upgrades. A large amount of my complaints about Oatchi are due to the concept of upgrading him as the game progresses, giving him more and more broken abilities. The reason this bothers me so much is because, unlike the captain upgrades, which range from redundant to standardly useful, Oatchi's upgrades actively defeat the point of becoming better at Pikmin. This is most noticeable in how it taints Dandori challenges and Trial of the Sage Leaf. You know, my favorite parts of the game. When you first encounter these, you might struggle, you might fail, you might have to try again and again and again until you finally figure it out, and even then, maybe you only get a passing grade. In a vacuum, the idea of improving at Pikmin, any past Pikmin game, is built on you becoming better as a player at managing your Pikmin and planning your actions. But in Pikmin 4, as Oatchi becomes more and more powerful, returning to challenges and beating them becomes hollow. Did you really improve over the course of the game, or did Oatchi turn down the difficulty for you? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's just the last one. It's especially noticeable in Sage Leaf and in Hefty Hallway, basically erasing the entire purpose of that challenge. And I already know what some of you will say. Yes, I advocated for not taking 100 Pikmin or all types as a measure of self-restraint to make the game more enjoyable. Why not just not upgrade Oatchi or turn off upgrades? I even did turn off some upgrades, and I think it's great that that's a feature. But that's a false equivalence and misunderstanding of my point. Limiting the amount of Pikmin or Pikmin types you have is a limitation I encourage if you're overwhelmed by the ideal way to play the game. It's about finding fun while acknowledging you're not playing at peak performance. Ignoring Oatchi's upgrades is choosing to ignore a main motivator and reward for playing the game. This game is so Oatchi heavy, constantly designing itself around him and presenting you with these upgrades in response to basic progression, that it's stupid to deny these upgrades, especially on a first playthrough. Could you go through this game without any but the essential upgrades and get more of a challenge? Yeah, but I bet even more cracks would begin to show when you realize how much this game expects you to use Oatchi. Before the game's launch, Nintendo posted a few interviews in their Ask the Developer series with the team behind Pikmin. At this time, I was in full despair mode about Pikmin 4, but I was shocked to find that reading through the devs' thoughts on what made Pikmin special, they were still completely 100% correct and true to its core. They talked about Pikmin having a mix of lightheartedness and somberness and real biology. They didn't like goals being set by someone else. They talked about management being inspiration and how Pikmin is fundamentally fun as a video game because of trial and error, repeat plays, and self-improvement. They talked about 1 being the baseline. There's other things I found interesting, like the Tim Burton inspiration that I totally saw after learning that, or how 4 seems like a response to fans liking 2 more than 3 and preferring more content over focused challenge. Everything in these interviews conveys that these people deeply understand the base value of Pikmin as a franchise, and yet, for some reason, all of that gets disregarded in Pikmin 4. Miyamoto acknowledges the game's inherent link to mortality and its difficulty, but clearly has concerns about the franchise not selling well because people are turned off by it. He's also clearly obsessed with imagining Pikmin in real life at this point. They talk about a good idea solving multiple issues at once, but this game feels like a circle of bad ideas feeding one another. They wanted to blend every aspect of Pikmin gameplay fans liked into one game, but the final result feels awkward and disjointed with random difficulty spikes. Most importantly, they talk about the kind of games Pikmin 1 through 3 are. Pikmin 1 and 3 are naturally considered time management, while Pikmin 2 is considered type management due to its extended challenges. But somehow Pikmin 4 lacks either. There's no concern over time, with the game actively tacking on pointless extra days and forgoing 3's brilliant fix to the stress over 1's limit. And there's no concern over types, because resources are bountiful, the hardest challenges don't threaten your Pikmin count, and Ochi does it all anyway. So what kind of game is this? Resource management? The most rudimentary game philosophy imaginable? Even then, just get whatever's in front of you and you'll have enough for everything in the game. The team's intimate understanding of the franchise somehow translated to making the opposite of it. When playing through the game and rewatching to take notes, I realized this game evokes absolutely no emotion in me. Outside occasional moments of frustration and rare moments of true joy, it was the basest level of input and output a game can give you. It seems like the most enjoyment people get from this is just as a collectathon, marveling at the scale of this game. 1, I think a collectathon is a terrible thing for Pikmin to be, and 2, it's really not even that big. The areas are bigger and there's more of them, but they're emptier and less tightly designed. There's plenty of treasure, but a lot of it is reused, as is the entire concept. Depending on how you look at some of the modes, it actually has less content than past games. All of the best parts of the game are either heavily influenced by prior games or completely ripped from them. And when it comes to the game's flaws, well, I think we've covered that. It overwrites any attachment to the characters and world in favor of something globally worse. The namesake characters are the least important they've ever been. The areas don't inspire replayability. The design of the game is bloated and sluggish, and the gameplay ensures that any satisfaction you could get from your achievements is washed away.
And the Game Award goes to Pikmin 4.
Much better games have made lesser issues and been panned, while Pikmin 4 has been heralded as a savior of the franchise, and I truly cannot get behind that. You know, it's funny though, this game did kind of succeed in bringing Dandori to the masses. At least to me. I found myself trying to be smarter in the way I handle small chores and tasks in my day-to-day life, trying to figure out the best order of things and what can be done while other things are going on. I've literally mumbled Dandori to myself while making lunch or doing the dishes. What I'm trying to say is that I understand that Pikmin 4 can have a positive impact. I cannot stress enough, as I said in the beginning, that these are my criticisms for the game, and I am not telling you that you need to hate it or that you're wrong for liking it. What I have tried to say is that this game is not perfect, nor does it have to be valid or enjoyable. I get it. People want the franchise to prosper. It's very important to them, and I know it is to me. Otherwise, why would I make this video? But that doesn't mean we have to hand-wave away critical errors in the controls and the loading and foundational issues like replacing the Pikmin. Like I said, if I can come out of this getting people to admit that their favorite Pikmin has issues, I'll have succeeded. And as for me, Pikmin 4 is a rare miss for Nintendo in an era of expanding on their biggest and even modest series while respecting their roots. It's not completely hopeless. The interviews and Dandori challenges prove to me that they still have the spark to make new and amazing Pikmin experiences experiences. And there's some stuff in the game talking about Olimar writing a guide to the planet, a setup for a sequel that I think would be really cute and fun. But if Pikmin 5 chooses to follow in 4's footsteps, I sadly won't be there to play it. Alright, thank you so much for sticking through this with me. This was a doozy. This took a ridiculously long time to make for a million reasons. And again, I mean no harm if you like Pikmin 4. Feel free to disagree or bring up anything I got wrong. Or honestly, if you really didn't like this, don't. I got so much traction off of people angry from my other negative Pikmin 4 video, but I really do hope that I was able to make you consider some things about the game that could be better and was entertaining, if not a little over enthusiastic in my complaints. If you've stumbled upon this video and actually want more, welcome. I do music here and with my other band, Night Fury. I do other gaming videos. I stream like once in a blue moon. Check some other videos out. Be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching. Oh, I left the freezer.